Okay. Hello to you all. It's a balmy 18 degrees here in Spearfish, South Dakota, so that's cool. It's lovely. It's supposed to be like 50 though tomorrow, I think, or Friday and Saturday. Um, so that's much better. For those of you who are avid hikers, if you've hiked Crow Peak recently and you know anything about its conditions, I would love to know. So please send me a message because I think I'm going to go on Saturday, but I don't really want to post hole for 6 miles of snow. So I might not go if it's disgusting. Okay. So this week we're talking about conflict. Yay! It's my favorite topic. I'm really good at dealing with it. People who have to deal with me in conflict don't think I'm good at dealing with it, or rather, they think I am and they don't like it. So I can't wait to talk about this topic. All right, announcements. Oh, Rachel is, well, I guess this is the first announcement. Rachel is in Sioux Falls for the Emerging Leaders Summit. She is a speaker. I don't know what time they're done. I think she's one of the last ones on stage. She gets to close the day for them, so she should be on stage in a hour or two, or maybe now, because it's already 3:00 there. So that is awesome. She's down there. The Emerging Leaders Summit is for bankers, financial services professionals, and so she gets to talk to all those folks about leadership and culture types and change. I am going to be recording a webinar tomorrow with Dr. Bob McIntosh. So he and I did some work together back in my gold mining days and created a system that where you have an employer has a more comprehensive occupational health management system. So where you can actually be more proactive in treating work comp cases so that some work comp case doesn't own your whole business. So that was a fun project, and he's doing some work with the company he's built called Fit to Lift. And so we're going to chat about that tomorrow on that webinar. If you want to sign up, the link to the webinar will be, where do you want to put it, Shelley? Okay. Shelley will put it in the comments, so you can join us for that webinar if you'd like to hear a little bit more about how you can have a more comprehensive work comp occupational health system in your business. Let's see. Oh, yes, we got our content certified with SHRM. So now our content is eligible for credits, recurring credits, CPUs for SHRM. So if you're SHRM certified or know someone who is, and you would love it if we would put on a course around here, usually they're in Rapid City, let us know. That would be awesome. Okay. We will be going to the Women of Distinction luncheon for the Girl Scouts next Tuesday. I was nominated to be a Woman of Distinction. Is that what okay? That's what I was nominated for. So that's cool. We are recording How the Hell Did I Get Here interviews. And I think we've got one coming up next week. And we actually just got the wrap down of the ones that we've recorded. I haven't even listened to them yet. So excited to listen to those. Let's see. Oh, yes, we have our challenge to get to 1,000 members by the end of the year. What are we at now, Shell? We're at 626. I just want to say, you guys, we started at like 600 or 590 something. So you're going to have to do better. Because like I said last week, or 2 weeks ago, maybe it was, we have literally invited everyone you know in Facebook land. So invite your friends to join us in the IX Ambassador group. Okay, and then if you order a planner now until, is there a time limit on this thing? Or is it just, okay. So if you order a planner, one of our 2020 planners on Amazon, 25% of the funds are donated to the DC Booth Fish Hatchery, or the Booth Society in Spearfish, that manages the fish hatchery right there next to City Park. So that's a pretty cool opportunity to make a donation. So 25% of whatever you pay for a planner, plus you get a really cool planner that goes along with the lives every week in IX Ambassador. So seems silly to not buy a planner. Just saying. Okay, those are all the announcements that Shelly told me I need to say. And now, for my next trick, we'll talk about, or I'll answer the questions. I'm like super prepared today. I actually pulled these up and screenshotted them and everything before. So you're welcome. Okay, so the number one question, or the has the most votes, is how can conflict avoidance be improved by using culture types? So let's start with this. First, conflict avoidance is not, in our world, is not necessarily what it sounds like it is, which is, let's just pretend everything's fine and sweep it under the rug and not talk about it at all and never have any conflict. That would be counterintuitive and very counterproductive for what we deliver to folks that we work with. So that is not what we mean. Conflict avoidance, or I guess what we mean when we're talking about conflict avoidance, is sort of more like preventative care. How do you make sure that you are taking good actions, being transparent in the way you communicate, discussing issues when they come up so that you don't have to worry about conflict or big, huge conflicts that could result in some legal matter or just a lot of ugly, bad juju or bad team dynamics or a decrease in productivity. So there's that. The definition of conflict avoidance in our world is more about preventative maintenance. It's not so much about damage control or just trying to ignore things entirely. Okay, so question. How can conflict avoidance be improved by using culture types? Well, fancy that. If you know the culture types of the folks you're working with, you kind of know how much conflict or change or flux they love to deal with or don't love to deal with, and how they like to deal with it. So if you're talking with someone who is a stabilizer or an organizer, someone who's order tolerant below the line, chances are there's a conflict because they feel they think that they don't have enough information, and that makes them feel uncertain, and so they kind of will pump the brakes about something, and they might be actually having a conflict with someone who's chaos tolerant, a fixer, or an independent, and those people are like, all right, let's move on, this seems like we're all good. Sally stabilizer over there is just going to be annoying because she doesn't like anything, and so let's just ignore her and move on. And it's not that Sally is annoying and doesn't like anything. It's just that she has lots of questions that she wants answered before she feels comfortable with something. And so you can use culture types to understand a little bit about folks in their work preferences and their environment preferences and how much information they like to collect. If they collect it from lots of different places, if they're team driven, or if they really, or lots of different people, or if they're more self-driven, they might just collect it from other places, the internet probably. Go find data and find information that way. So conflict avoidance can be done really well by knowing those things about the different culture types. I think another important point to make is that a lot of times people say, oh, well, I'm a fixer, you're a fixer, so we probably see the world pretty much the same way and do all the things, the same. Well, that's not really true. So you can be in an argument or have conflict with someone who is like you in their culture type or in their work preferences. And a lot of times, actually, we see that people have issues with folks who are the same culture type as them, or if they're both chaos tolerant, both order tolerant, because they have the same process. So they know intellectually, all right, we both kind of are on the same page here, but they might be trying to solve a problem a different way, or have a different idea about what the end goal is or how to get there. So that can cause some serious conflict between people. So that's something to look out for too. It's not just the folks that are different than you that you'll struggle with. Sometimes it's the folks that are same as you. If you have any questions as we go along, let me know. Okay. What is runner's curve and how does it apply to my career? So this is a funny little debate in our office. So runner's curve is something that Rachel and I talked about a long time ago when we were writing the book. And then it sort of got in the book, but sort of not really. So it's on page 170, but we don't really call it the runner's curve. It's on page 170 and 171. And anyway, the runner's curve, even though it's not called that in the book, the idea behind it, she and I were talking one day about, we were talking about conflict and how do you manage that better? And somehow we got on the subject of running marathons. And I said, it's not like I can just train for a marathon in a month. I would be like in deep trouble if I did that. And I mean, there's no way I would be ready. And so we kind of were talking about the amount of energy that goes into solving a problem. And as you put it off or procrastinate or ignore it, the problem gets bigger and bigger and closer in time to when it's eventually going to blow up where you have to run the race. And so as you don't do anything about it, it gets worse and worse and worse all the time. And so that's where we created or talked about the runner's curve. And so really the faster you handle something, so as you shorten the timeline to when you handle a conflict, it decreases the amount of energy it takes to manage that one conflict. And the runner's curve goes up like this. So a lot of times what we do is we put it off for as long as we possibly can. And as we're putting it off, the amount of energy it takes to manage the situation goes up and up and up until pretty soon we're up here in this corner and we've put all this time into it and all this energy into it, and it still is going to blow up and be a ginormous mess, and it never needed to be in the first place. Much like if you're running, training for any kind of any sort of endurance sport, but if you're training for a marathon and you can't just jump off the couch, train for a month, and then you have to plan and train and run and cross train and do all of the eat right and sleep and drink lots of water and lots of mental head game, all that stuff has to be done in little increments at a time as you go along. And if I just tried to do all that in 1 month right before I ran, I would be, did you know that it's National F Word Day? Sadly, my kids told me this actually, because I just almost wanted to say I would be effed. Huh? Well, this is what I said. Joby said it's fire truck. What F word starts with F and ends with UCK? Fire truck. You guys can confirm on your own if it's actually National F Word Day. I have no idea. I'm a little bit scared that my kids told me this. Okay. So anyway, if I tried to train for a marathon like that, I would be effed. What is runner's curve and how does it apply to my career? I think that, how does it apply to my career? Well, if you want to do really cool things and you keep putting them off, eventually they just get harder and harder and harder. So a good example is like getting your MBA. If you wanted to get it, if you're at that point in your life, or if you wanted to go back to school and finish a degree, or if you want to change your career path entirely, the longer you put it off, the harder it seems like it is to accomplish. And in reality, some of those things do get harder as you age, maybe because you have kids at home and it seems really impossible to do family and life and career and also get a degree or change your job or whatever. And so if you make little steps towards whatever changes you want in your career a little bit at a time, instead of trying to say, well, I guess someday I'd like to be a vet. And if I'd like to be a vet, I just want to think that if all I do is think about that I'm going to be a vet someday, that becomes so overwhelming that I would never actually take any steps towards doing that. So you want to map out, kind of a plan about what sorts of steps do I need to take to get there. And so then that makes sure that runner's curve is lower as opposed to higher, where you're using all of this, spending all of this energy that you don't need to be spending over a longer period of time. And same thing, obviously applies to conflict and conversations in your career. The sooner you handle them, the better off you'll be. And I'm not saying, though, that like conflict is necessary. I think it's sort of fun to manage, but it's not fun or easy for most people. This makes it more tolerable. It doesn't make it go away. It's just it's a better way to handle conflict. What's the last question here? How can conflict avoidance affect my team's performance? Oh, golly. Well, I guess imagine a team you've been on, or a team you've seen or heard stories about from a friend, or any of that kind of stuff, where conflict was just the way they did business. Where, maybe people didn't really, they let it get to a point where people didn't trust each other, and there was no necessarily loyalty. And how did that business run? Does it run well? Does it produce well? Or, does their culture great? People love working there. Turnover's low? Generally not. People don't like to deal with conflict, but people would rather conflict was dealt with than not. So if you give folks in your organization the tools that they need so they can deal with conflict, whether those tools are a solid HR team, or solid leadership and management team, or maybe it's you send them through some training about how do you have good conversations, teach them things like the experience cube. If you do stuff like that with people, then, and they have tools and resources to deal with conflict better, then you don't have to worry so much about performance or culture. That becomes part of the performance and culture that you have. So on the flip side of it, so you've got the idea of the organization who has maybe not a great culture, maybe their turnover is high, people are a little bit backbitey and nobody loves it there, they can't keep anybody. And then on the flip side of that, if you have a culture that's great, what are the pieces of that people are attracted to? They feel like they can talk to anybody about anything, and they don't have to worry about repercussions for having concerns. And let's just talk about that for a minute. People don't have to actually, there never had to be any repercussions for anybody bringing up any concerns ever at any point in time in the history of your organization for this to exist in perception. So what I say all the time, for many years have said, especially when I was in HR, perception is reality. Their perception is your reality as leader, they being the employees or external stakeholders, whomever it is, but specifically I'm talking about your employees. So if they perceive that there will be repercussions for bringing up concerns, they're not going to talk. Even if you say, no, I promise you can say whatever you want. If there are actions that don't match that statement, people are not going to tell you anything. So you have to be very careful to not just say you're creating the environment, but actually create the environment. I was talking with another consultant this morning, and he's got a client who is a ginormous global company, and he does team building for their organization. And he said it's fascinating that when I sit down with the leadership team and say, okay, what do you want this team building to be about? What do you want these folks to learn? What do you want them to take away from this? They're like, I don't know. What do you mean? And he said, well, what do you mean? What do I mean? Like, what do you want these people to learn? What should they know about when they leave here? What kind of tools do you want them to have? And they said, I don't know, whatever you teach. We just, we're checking a box. This isn't our budget. this is a huge, I will not say the name, but this is a huge global company, probably one of the biggest companies in the world. Certainly one of the biggest presences in the world. And they're just checking a box. And so really creating a culture where you care about your people, you give them tools and resources they need so they can manage conflict better, because it happens all the time. You'll have much better performance metrics, way more people meeting KPIs than if you just let it handle itself. Because it even says in the book, part of the reason unspoken conversations never come to light is that conflict is something that most people avoid at all costs. How many times have you decided to turn a blind eye thinking, I'll just let that go, maybe it'll sort itself out? Lots of times, we know. How often does it sort itself out? Probably never. So if there's conflict, handle it. Handle it as it says in the book, right damn now. One tool that works really well for handling conflict to help people sort of compartmentalize their experience so they have a way to have the conversation is the experience cube. And that's one that we teach with, all of our clients really, as long as we have time, unless it's like a short 1 hour keynote. But that one that's a great tool that you can share with your employees to help them manage conflict a little bit better. And I think that's actually in the files in this group. The Experience Cube image is in the files. And the other thing I would say is really important is maybe change the mindset around conflict. I don't really love the word conflict. I mean, it's kind of like the word garbage, though. Like garbage is garbage. Conflict, same thing. But, you could talk about it in terms of challenges. So if somebody comes into your office and they says, I have a conflict with Shelly. Shelly, she never agrees with anything I say, no matter what I bring up, no matter what kind of ideas. Even if I agree with her, she somehow argues with me, blah, blah, blah. And you can say, well, that sounds like a real challenge. And start transitioning your language around conflict so that other people pick that up. And then it's not all about conflict. It's about challenging each other, and challenging each other is healthy. So then you can start having better conversations about that feeling that goes along with it. And then the feeling will change eventually as well. So we have answered the 3 questions about the mysterious runner's curve. Page 170 is where that is. And then conflict avoidance. And, the reality is deal with it now. Fix it now. Tiny little problems, they grow and grow and grow. Problems are kind of like white lies. If you take care of this one, or if you appease somebody instead of actually fixing the problem, you kind of give them whatever they want. And pretty soon somebody else wants that, and then somebody else wants that, and then you can't give it to that person, so that creates an even bigger problem. You're not going to go talk to your boss about it because that seems stupid, because you already made like 3 mistakes in a row with it. And then that becomes an even bigger problem, and then it blows way up, and it's almost impossible to manage well at that point. So making sure that you manage problems often and early is the best approach to having a healthy culture in your organization and improving your team's performance. If you want help with any of that, look us up. We do consulting all the time. If you have any other questions about today's topic, then you just let me know. You know how to find us. All right, I'm going to go back out and trudge in the snow. Wish me luck. I hope I don't freeze to death. Lead powerfully. Change the world. See you next week.